Welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to talk about the pinnacle of divine love. I'm going to start with talking about the renowned philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. You may say, well, what does Nietzsche have to do with all this? He's the guy that said that God is dead. So why are you talking about him? Well, there's something very interesting he said besides that. And he said, in his book, Thus Spake Zarathustra, he wrote, I would believe only in a God who could dance. Let me repeat that again. The same guy who said, God is dead, Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, wrote, I would believe only in a God who could dance. Nietzsche's well-known quote implies his preference for a God who dances, a God who loves, a God who enjoys life to the fullest. In short, a God who has better things to do than sending people to heaven or hell. Krishna is declared to be Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the ancient 5,000-year-old text called the Vedas. And he is that eternally blissful, ever-enjoying, all-knowing, all-powerful notion of God that Nietzsche was looking for. I wish he could have been here today to hear this. So what kind of person is God? It is said that God created man in his own image. If God is how we think of him, judgmental, formal, scary, the worst kind of men might bear resemblance to that notion of God. What if God was something else? A reverential idea of God is at best only good as the beginning of our spiritual journey. As the sages of India have taught for thousands of years, everything comes from God. Therefore, everything can be found in God, including the full range of human expressions and relationships. For thousands of years, these sages sat on the banks of sacred Indian rivers, hearing and reciting the fascinating Sanskrit verses of the ancient Vedas, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam, which describe God as Krishna and all the wonderful ways in which he loves and us and the ways we can love him. You will find on Amazon a wonderful book called A God Who Dances by Kalakanta Das. That's from where I got the quote here. God is not limited to being our Father. Father is a beginner's way of approaching God. The Father image fits perfectly into all that we want from God. We want him to fulfill our desires, to solve our problems, to take away our worries. In other words, God exists to serve us, and we exist to enjoy the bounty of creation. This paradigm, in my opinion, is self-serving and egotistical. It points to the biggest human flaw. We exploit each other, we exploit nature, and then we exploit God for our enjoyment, for our needs, for our desires. Very few actually ask and go deeper. If the universe was created by God, then it is his property. If God owns everything, then we, and including us, then we exist for his pleasure, not the other way around. Let's go a step further. Why did God create us? Was it for our pleasure or his? Why did he not keep us with him? Why did he send us here to earth? After all, they say he loves us. These are questions worth asking. The Srimad Bhagavatam, which we've been reading from, tells us that the Supreme Being, Bhagavan or God, wants to have a loving relationship with us, and that we were created to serve him. We are part of him, and the part is meant to serve the whole, just as a hand serves the body. The hand cannot exist by itself and pleasure itself. Like, let's say I cut off my hand. Can it exist by itself? Can it pleasure itself independent of the body? No. It must be connected to the body and give pleasure to the body. In this way, when the body is satisfied, so is the hand. Similarly, when we give pleasure to God, we revive our true nature and become truly satisfied. So this is the secret behind here. It's not that we shouldn't enjoy. It's not that we shouldn't have pleasure. It's not that we shouldn't, but we all need to do that in connection with God. And the art of doing that is shown by Krishna. How do we do that? The Vedas call God Ishvara, the supreme controller. They call him Purusha, the supreme enjoyer. And we are to be enjoyed by him, just as a parent brings a child into this world for their own pleasure, and not so the child may reject them or hate them or declare that they do not exist. No. In much the same way, God wants to enjoy with us and give us pleasure. And we, unfortunately, want to play God and enjoy separately from him. But this is a childish notion, just like children want to play adult, right? Even teenagers. So I have one question for you. How's it going? Are you truly happy, satisfied, content? Perhaps the missing ingredient is God, the God who dances. We are now in the most intimate part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are learning the ways of romantic love for God. This is the most exalted love story, the most exalted love for God, and the least understood. This is the romance that Sufis like Rumi and Christian mystics and intimate devotees of Krishna like Meera and Raskhan speak about. This is the highest form of love of God and the most difficult to understand. That is, if we try to equate God with ourselves. So please keep an open mind as you listen. Feel free to ask questions, and let's get started. So our narrative, this ancient narrative from the Bhagavatam, which was written 5,000 years ago, talks about Krishna. At that time, when he appeared, the Supreme Being appeared on this earth, he came with his entire entourage. We talked about his parents earlier, we talked about his friends, and now in this section we're talking about the women, the girlfriends of Krishna, the Supreme Lord. The gopis, that's what they're called, are the cowherd girls of Vrindavan. They were great sages and highly evolved beings in previous lives, and they had taken birth in the same place as their beloved, the Supreme Godhead, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who is the cause of all creation. So why did they do that? Why did they come here when he appeared? So that they could enjoy wonderful pastimes with him and share with us that at the core of our endless searching for that one true love, for our soulmate, for our ideal lover, is the soul's longing for its ultimate love, which is God. So we're now in Canto 10, text number 32. Shukdev Goswami, the great sage, is speaking to the king Parikshit. And he tells the king, having thus sung and spoken their hearts out in various charming ways, the gopis began to weep loudly. They were very eager to see their beloved Krishna. So I'm going to fill you in on a little bit of the backstory here, and then we'll come back. So Krishna had come to meet the gopis in the middle of the night and then disappeared. And now they were looking for him everywhere. In the previous episode, we talked about the Gopi Geet, the songs of the gopis, as they sang their heart out, crying, looking for him. You know, it is said that one of the easiest ways to attract God is when we put our heart and call out to him. And the most powerful calling out is when we can actually cry, not for what we want, not for our selfish desires, but for him, to have him, when there is a longing. The greatest longing is that longing for the divine, the longing for God. And when we have that longing, and when we are so bereft of him, and we realize that life doesn't work without God, then at that time we enter into this state that the gopis were experiencing. They had personal association with God. They had come to meet him in the middle of the night. They had been looking at him, admiring him, listening to his flute playing. They had been singing and dancing with him. They had gone into the river to play with him. And then he had disappeared. because they got proud. They began to think, oh, he's mine. He's only with me. Because see, Krishna, when he's with the gopis, he expands himself into thousands of forms. To each one of them began to think, he's only with me. And so when this selfishness creeps in, when this egotistic thinking creeps in, God is no longer there. I had quoted last time the very beautiful poem by Kabir where he says, when I existed, God did not exist. जब मैं था तब हरि नहीं, अब हरि है तो मैं नहीं. So now when God is there, then I no longer exist. This I refers to the ego. And when that ego vanishes or disappears, then the empty space is filled by God. And that's what happens. The moment that ego comes in, he's gone. So now that he was gone and they had been looking for him everywhere, suddenly, once again, Krishna reappeared, their beloved. With a smile on his lotus face, he appeared before the gopis wearing a garland and a yellow garment. He directly appeared as one who can bewilder the mind of Cupid, who himself bewilders the minds of ordinary people. So you see, Cupid, it is said, bewilders the minds of ordinary people. But the Supreme Being is so beautiful that he bewilders the mind even of Cupid. When the gopis saw that their dearmost Krishna had returned to them, they all stood up at once. And out of affection for him, their eyes bloomed wide. It was as if the air of life had re-entered their bodies. One gopi joyfully took Krishna's hand between her folded palms, and another placed his arm anointed with sandalwood paste on her shoulder. A slender gopi respectfully took in her joined hands the betel nut he had chewed, and another gopi, burning with desire, put his lotus feet on her breasts. One gopi, beside herself with loving anger, bit her lips and stared at him with frowning eyebrows, as if to wound him with her harsh glances. You see, he'd been gone for a long time. Another gopi looked with unblinking eyes upon his lotus face, but even after deeply relishing the sweetness, she did not feel truly satisfied, just as mystic saints are never satiated when meditating upon the Lord's lotus feet. So when saints or mystics, yogis, meditate upon the divine within their heart, this is what they see. They actually experience the divine within their heart. One gopi took him through the aperture of her eyes and placed him within her heart. Then, with her eyes closed and her bodily hairs standing on end, she continually embraced him within. Thus immersed in transcendental ecstasy, she resembled a yogi meditating upon God. You have to realize these gopis were not ordinary women. These were very highly evolved yogis and saints. They had taken birth to be with Krishna. Even during the time of Ram, many great sadhus and rishis and sages had asked Ram that they wanted to be in a loving, intimate relationship with him, to appear as women, engage with him and be his wife or be his servant in some way. But he said, in this life, as Ram, I will take only one wife. That is it. And that is Sita. So he was there as the ideal king, as the ideal son, as the ideal husband. But as Krishna, he came to break all the rules, to show us that God is not subjected to the rules of morality and of karma and all of that. As the gopis enjoyed the greatest festivity when they saw their beloved Krishna again, they gave up the distress of separation, just as people in general forget their misery when they gain the association of spiritually enlightened persons. I don't know if you've had the good fortune of meeting with someone who is spiritually enlightened. I have. I've met many of them. And I can tell you this statement is so true, that in their presence there is such an aura, there is such a radiance, that all miseries of this world literally disappear, and you begin to experience a kind of divine presence that is unlike anything you've come across in this world. That is because they have completely purified their heart, their mind, their soul. And now the radiance of who they are at the deepest level, at the soul level, now shines through. And that is something we can all aspire to and achieve even in this life. But it takes a certain practice. It takes a certain austerity. It takes a certain letting go of certain things. Because when you want something greater, you have to get rid of something lesser. When you want a greater pleasure, you have to let go a lesser pleasure. When you want a greater goal, you let go of small disturbances along the way, things that deviate you or distract you. Encircled by the gopis now, who were relieved of all distress, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, shone forth splendidly. My dear King, Shukadev says, Krishna thus appeared like the Paramatma, the Supersoul, encircled by his spiritual potencies. The Almighty Lord, the Supreme Godhead, then took the gopis with him to the bank of the river Kalindi. This is part of the Yamuna. And with the hands, so the river had with the hands of her waves scattered piles of soft sand upon the shore. In that auspicious place, the breeze bearing the fragrance of blooming flowers attracted many bees, and the abundant rays of the autumn moon dispelled the darkness of night. Their heartache vanished, or rather vanquished, by the ecstasy of seeing Krishna. The gopis felt their desires completely fulfilled. For their dear friend Krishna, they arranged a seat with their shawls, which they smeared with kumkum powder. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for whom the great masters of mystic meditation arrange a seat within their hearts, took his seat in the assembly of gopis. His transcendental body, the exclusive abode of beauty and opulence within the three worlds, shone brilliantly as the gopis worshipped him. Sri Krishna had awakened romantic desires within the gopis, and they honored him by glancing at him with playful smiles. Gesturing amorously with their eyebrows and massaging his hands and feet as they held them in their laps, even while worshipping him. However, they felt somewhat angry, and thus they addressed him as follows. So this is again about being real. You don't have to just be all goody-goody two-shoes. You've got a grievance, you've got a complaint, you can talk about it. You can be real, authentic, right? Even with God. You don't have to hide your feelings. That's not necessary. And the gopis said, some people reciprocate the affection only of those who are affectionate towards them, while others show affection even to those who are indifferent or inimical. Yet others will not show affection toward anyone. Dear Krishna, please properly explain this matter to us. So I'll just recap that for you. Some people reciprocate the affection only of those who are affectionate towards them. Basically, if I like you, then you like me. While others show affection even to those who are indifferent or inimical. And yet others will not show affection toward anyone. Dear Krishna, please properly explain this matter to us. So they're kind of like taunting him a bit, because they've been so affectionate, they've been so loving, they've been so sweet, and yet he's disappeared. So they're kind of behind that questioning, which seems very general, is a very specific thing as well. So Krishna again speaks in a very general way. He says, so-called friends who show affection for each other only to benefit themselves are actually selfish. They have no true friendship, nor are they following the true principles of Dharma. Dharma is a very deep topic. It's not just religion. It's actually very like the ways of godly living. So it's not just following some ritual. It's not just following some book. It's actually learning how to live in alignment with God. It's a long topic. We've talked about it in previous episodes. I won't go into it here. Anyway, so he's saying that people who show affection for each other only to benefit themselves are selfish. They have no true friendship, nor are they following the principles of Dharma. If they did not expect benefit for themselves, they would not reciprocate. In other words, if you didn't, if they didn't have a benefit, so why should I do what's in it for me? Right? You've heard that line plenty of times. So in the purport it's written here, Krishna reminds the gopis that in pure, loving friendship, there is no sense of selfish interest, but rather only love for one's true friend. In the next verse it is written, my dear gopis, some people are genuinely merciful, or like parents, naturally affectionate. Such parents who devotedly serve, even when those who fail to reciprocate with them are following the true, faultless path of Dharma, and they are true well-wishers. So let's explore this a little deeper. Persons who devotedly serve even those who fail to reciprocate with them are following the true faultless path of Dharma, and they are your true well-wishers. I really want you to now think for yourself. Who is the kind of person you'd like to have friendship with? Someone who has expectations from you, or who just reciprocates from you, or who does it for their own selfish interest because of what they can get out of you? Or someone who will be there regardless, even when you're not connecting with them. They will continue to care about you and love you. Even when you are not reciprocating, they will continue to be true to their Dharma. That is to say, I am your friend and I will continue to act so regardless of your behavior. Sometimes you're there, sometimes you're not there. I'm not here because I'm not going to act just according to you. It's not a tit for tat, but rather it is, I'm acting according to my Dharma. I believe that this is the way of friendship, to be there unconditionally. Now, I know we're not good at that, we might struggle with that, but we need to also know that that is possible. So just to recap here, some people are genuinely merciful, or it could be because you're merciful, it could be because you're compassionate, or it could be because, like a parent, you're naturally affectionate, you just are loving towards people. Such persons who devotedly serve even those who fail to reciprocate for them are following the true faultless path of Dharma and are your true well-wishers. Now, some of you have questions, and I'm so loving the fact that some of you are writing your questions. Please continue doing that. I will take them all up at the end. So, just so as not to interrupt the flow right now. I hope you'll bear with me. I hope you'll stay around. But please know that I will answer all your questions and comments. You can also write down comments. I do see them here. I see them coming in. So please feel free. Yeah? I don't expect you to agree. I don't expect you to believe. I don't expect you to have any of that. You are welcome to question, but do it with an open mind. That's all I'd ask. You've come to a point that is very, very, we've gone through around 95 episodes of the Bhagavatam. That's 95 hours of videos in which we've explored the entire philosophy. You've now come to the crown jewel of the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to talk about a God who dances. We're going to talk about that Rasa Leela, the divine dance in love of God. So we're in a very high vibration topic, and there's going to be a lot of questions, including doubts. So feel free to express them. And then Krishna goes on to say, then there are those individuals who are spiritually self-satisfied, materially fulfilled, or by nature ungrateful, or simply envious of superiors. So two sides, okay? One who are sort of on the light end of things and the other on the dark end. Those who are on the light end are the ones who are spiritually self-satisfied. In other words, they don't have any particular agenda. They're not trying to prove anything. Then there's another kind who are materially fulfilled. They've got everything they need. There's others who are ungrateful or simply envious of superiors, so those are the dark side. Such persons will not love even those who love them. What to speak of those who are inimical? In the purport it says, some people being spiritually self-satisfied do not reciprocate others' affection because they want to avoid entanglement in mundane dealings. So they're not looking for likes. They're not looking for people to respect them. They're not looking for people to love them. They're not looking for anything. They're self-satisfied. Other persons who do not reciprocate simply out of envy or arrogance, because they think they're so wealthy, they're so rich, they're so great, they've got it all. And then there are others who just fail to reciprocate because they are materially satisfied and thus uninterested in new material opportunity. Krishna patiently explains all these things to the gopis. And then he says, but the reason I do not immediately reciprocate the affection of living beings, even when they worship me, O gopis, is that I want to intensify their loving devotion. They then become like a poor man who has gained some wealth and then lost it, and who thus becomes so anxious about it that he can think of nothing else. So let me share with you very, very personal examples that I've come across in my own life and that of others. That in the beginning, when you walk on the spiritual path, you may get some amazing insights. For example, I remember the very first thing that changed my life is having a dream in which Krishna appeared. And we were about to have an accident. I was driving. I had fallen asleep at the wheel. Had it not been for that dream, I would have died. Now, did I ever have a dream like that again? No. But in that moment, it changed my life. I went from being an atheist, a complete, well, agnostic would be more accurate because I was just questioning everything. I was 20 years old. From that to becoming a complete believer, because at that moment when I realized my life had been saved, I was like, Krishna saved me because I had seen him in my dream. And the same thing is described by many people. Narad Muni had that particular, he's the great sage, and he had where Krishna appeared before him and then disappeared. And that increased the intensity of his desire. So many of you would have had experiences of that kind, but then they don't reappear. They don't always happen. And then you may think, well, maybe that was just an illusion. Maybe God is not real. Maybe God just abandoned me. Many variations can happen. But here you see Krishna saying, I don't immediately reciprocate the affection of living beings even when they worship me. I want to intensify their loving devotion. It's just like a person who's gained wealth and then loses it, right? Such a person now is so eager to get it back, and life does not make sense without it. That person's got a taste of something so wonderful that they can't live without it. Right? I came across many who were like that. They literally jumped off of tall buildings because they lost all their money. And they were like, life wasn't worth living anymore. In the purport it states here, Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, if you haven't read Bhagavad Gita, please do. I've done an entire series on the Bhagavad Gita. I have a playlist on my website, on my YouTube channel. And he says in Bhagavad Gita, Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajami aham. This is Sanskrit. He says, as people approach me, I reciprocate with them accordingly. Yet, even if God is approached by someone with devotion, to intensify the devotee's love, he may not immediately reciprocate fully. In fact, he is truly reciprocating, because a sincere devotee always prays, please help me to love you purely. If that is our wish, and that is really the ultimate prayer, not God give me this, God give me that. No, God is not here. He's not your Santa Claus. He's not your order provider. He's not your Amazon who's supposed to deliver your orders and give them to you within 2 days or overnight or whatever else. No. God exists so that you may drop all your desires and desire only Him and desire a loving relationship, because therein lies the craving that all of us have within us. We want true love. And you know how it is when you find someone who you love, even in this world, well, you got to give up your Tinder, you got to give up your whatever, app that you're on. You got to give up all other people and then focus on that one person. Now what to say of God? If you want God, if you want love of God, if you want to experience the highest love of all, the greatest love of all, well then, you got to be willing to give up everything. Desire at its very root. And of course, it's not easy for us to do that. But that's where he helps us. And even sometimes not being there is part of that. Sometimes just to increase that longing, sometimes just to bring out that sincerity, because we have everything in the world and nothing in the world has satisfied us. When we begin to realize that, I've got a house, but everything's a struggle, everything is hard work, everything is just draining my energy. And then I go into this place of hearing about these pastimes and I'm suddenly uplifted. I'm suddenly feeling transported into another magical, beautiful world. That's the place he wants us to come to, where there is only him. Tu hi tu, only you. There is only you. There is only you. I see you everywhere. I see you within me, within everyone. And I see only you. And it's in that place. So God is not just impersonal. He's also personal. He's also being. He's also got a form. And that form is beautiful and lovable and adorable. So let's continue. So sincere devotee always prays, please help me love you purely. Therefore, what appears as neglect is actually the fulfillment of the devotee's prayer. Krishna intensifies our love for him by apparently separating himself from us. And the result is that we achieve what we really wanted and prayed for. Intense love for the absolute truth. Thus, Krishna's apparent negligence is actually his thoughtful reciprocation in the fulfillment of our deepest and purest desire. According to many of the highly evolved saints or acharyas, when Krishna began speaking these words, the gopis looked at one another with squinting eyes, trying to hide the smiles. They realized that he was bringing them to the highest perfection of loving service. Then Krishna continued, my dear girls, according to that understanding that simply for my sake you rejected the authority of worldly opinion of the Vedas and of your relatives. In other words, they had just left their homes, they had left their families, they had left everything and come to be with him. And in the beginning he'd said to them, you should go back. He told them, no, why are you here? It's late at night. I was just playing my flute. But they'd heard the flute and they were mesmerized. They just dropped everything. Dropped the rules of all the religion. So that's what he says. Sarva dharma parityaja. Give up all religion. Give up all your moralities and just surrender unto me. I will free you from all karma, from all sinful reaction. This promise was not made for the first time 2,000 years ago by Christ. This promise was made 5,000 years ago by Krishna first. I will free you from all karmic reaction, from all sinful reactions, and give you moksha or liberation, which means I will bring you back home, back to me. This is his promise. So he's saying here that, and for that he says, Sarva dharma parityaja, give up all your religiosity and learn to love from the heart, learn to live from the heart. And not just with everybody around you, not just with that special someone who you call your lover or your beloved, but with God as well, more so than anything else, because that is the foundation that can never be shaken. The lover of this world may be here today, gone tomorrow. Nobody is here forever. But God will be there forever. And that's a gift you're going to give yourself. That gift of spiritual growth, that gift of love of God is going to be there with you lifetime after lifetime. It's a wealth that will never be lost. It is a wealth that you will take with you for eternity. Whatever progress you make, Krishna says in the Gita, specifically says this, that whatever progress you make spiritually, that is never lost. Your material things will be lost, but not the spiritual growth you make. And spiritual growth has nothing to do with tarot cards and astrology and all these kind of time-wasted things there. It is to do when you open your heart to God. All right. Understanding that simply for my sake you had rejected the authority of worldly opinion of the Vedas and of your relatives, I acted as I did only to increase your attachment to me. Even when I removed myself from your sight by suddenly disappearing, I never stopped loving you. Therefore, my dear beloved gopis, Please do not harbor any bad feelings towards me, for I am and will always be your beloved. I am not able to repay my debt for your spotless service. What is spotless about their service? Because they're asking nothing in return. At one point, they refer to themselves as, we are your maidservants, we are your dasi, like a slave, we are yours. We belong to you. And we ask for nothing in return. Like a servant asks for something, right? A servant has expectations, a holiday, leave, this, that. But the gopis asked for nothing from him, other than to see him, other than to love him. So that's why he says, I will never be able to repay my debt for your spotless service, even within a lifetime of Brahma. Brahma's lifetime, this is from an alien realm. Brahma is known to be the creator of the universe, and his lifetime is, oh gosh, I don't remember now. His one day I remember is 4.32 billion years. Half the day, and then equal time is the night. So anyway, time is different in different realms and different planets. For him it's like 100 years, but not for us. Okay, so I will not be able to repay even in the lifetime of Brahma. Your connection with me is beyond reproach. You have worshipped me, cutting off all domestic ties which are difficult to break. Therefore, please let your own glorious deeds be your compensation. Is written in the purport. In conclusion, the gopis became eternally glorious by their behavior in Krishna's temporary absence, and the mutual love between them was wonderfully enhanced. We now come to the Rasa dance, the most enticing, beautiful, and sensual aspect of God's love. When the gopis, the cowherd girls, heard that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, speak these charming words, they forgot their distress caused by separation from him. Touching his transcendental limbs, they felt all their desires fulfilled. There on the river Yamuna's banks, Govinda, Krishna, then began the pastime of the Rasa dance in the company of those jewel among women, the faithful gopis who joyfully linked their arms together. Let me show you. This is the Rasa Leela, the Rasa dance. Look closely and you will see something very interesting. You will notice that with every one of the women, there is another Krishna. He had expanded himself so that despite them being hundreds of gopis, only a few are shown here. With each one of them was another Krishna. Look again. And again. The festive Rasa dance commenced with the gopis arrayed in a circle. Krishna expanded himself and entered between each pair of gopis. And as the master of mystic power, he placed his arms around their necks. Each girl thought he was standing next to her alone. The devas, the demigods, and their wives, now they were witnessing from overhead. Let's bring you back to the pictures. See the dance continuing here. Different renditions. But now we come to the picture or the scene that they're talking about. You see on top, there are those bird-like creatures. Well, those are depictions of how the devas, the demigods, who are basically alien beings, had come to witness the Rasa Leela, the Rasa dance. So it says here that the demigods and their wives were overwhelmed with eagerness to witness the Rasa dance, and they soon crowded the sky with their hundreds of celestial airplanes. Kettle drums then resounded in the sky while flowers rained down, and the chief singers of the devas, of the demigods and their wives, sang Sri Krishna's spotless glories. Now, many people think that in Hinduism, which is actually called Sanatana Dharma, that's the technical correct word for it, the eternal dharma of humanity, that in Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma, there are many gods, hundreds, thousands. It's true, but they're not God, the Supreme Being. There is one Supreme Being. There are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of devas or demigods who handle the affairs of the universe. God doesn't personally handle everything. That'd be crazy. God would go crazy. He's delegated everything out. And what is he doing? Oh, he's enjoying with his devotees. What else should he do? Just like you see in the Rasa Leela. That's what God's doing in the spiritual world. Dancing, singing, enjoying, having a wonderful time. And wants us to join in as well. And that's why he comes to show us what life is like with God. A tumultuous sound arose from the armlets, the ankle bells, and the waist bells of the gopis as they sported with their beloved Krishna in the circle of the Rasa dance. In the midst of the dancing gopis, Krishna appeared most brilliant, like an exquisite sapphire in the midst of golden ornaments. As the gopis sang in praise of Krishna, their feet danced, their hands gestured, and their eyebrows moved with playful smiles. With their braids and belts tied tight, their waists bending, their faces perspiring, the garments on their breasts moving this way and that, and their earrings swinging on their cheeks, Sri Krishna's young consorts shone like streaks of lightning in a mass of clouds. Eager to enjoy conjugal love, their throats colored with various pigments, the gopis sang loudly and danced. They were overjoyed by Krishna's touch, and they sang songs that filled the entire universe. One gopi, joining Krishna in his singing, sang pure melodious tones that rose harmoniously above his. Krishna was pleased and showed great appreciation for her performance, saying, "Wonderful, excellent." Then another gopi repeated the same melody and in a special metrical pattern, and Krishna praised her also. When one gopi grew tired from the rasa dance, she turned to Krishna standing at her side, holding a baton, and grasped his shoulder with her arm. The dancing had loosened her bracelets and the flowers in her hair. Upon the shoulder of one gopi, Krishna placed his arm, whose natural blue lotus fragrance was mixed with that of sandalwood pulp, anointing it. As the gopi relished that fragrance, her bodily hair stood on end in jubilation, and she kissed his arm. Next to Krishna's cheek, one gopi put her own, beautified by the effulgence of her earrings, which glittered as she danced. Krishna then carefully gave her the betel nut he was chewing, gave it to her to eat. Another gopi became fatigued as she danced and sang, the bells on her ankles and waist tinkling. So she placed upon her breast the comforting lotus hand of Lord Achyuta. This is the name of Krishna, and it is very significant that it's used here, who was standing by her side. So in the Brahma Samhita, Krishna is described as infallible, Achyuta, which means that he never forgets who he is. He never falls down. He never becomes forgetful of who he is, even when he comes into this world. There are some philosophers that we refer to as Mayavadi or impersonalists, and they say, "I am God, but I have forgotten that I am God." How can God forget? If you forget, then you are not God. There is no other argument. God cannot forget. God always remembers. He is Achyuta. Achyuta means infallible, one who doesn't fall down or deteriorate in some way. God cannot be entrapped by the illusions of this world, by Maya. The Mayavadi philosopher says, "I am God, now I am under the illusion of Maya. I have forgotten myself that I am God, and by meditation, I shall become God." Prabhupada says, this is all nonsense. God cannot forget that he is God. Having attained as their intimate lover, Sri Krishna, the exclusive consort of the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, the gopis enjoyed great pleasure. They sang his glories as he held their necks with his arms. Enhancing the beauty of the gopis' faces were the lotus flowers behind their ears, the locks of hair decorating their cheeks, and the drops of perspiration. The reverberation of their armlets and ankle bells made a loud musical sound, and their wreath of flowers on their head. They had flowers, a wreath of flowers on their head. Those flowers scattered. Thus the gopis danced with the Supreme Lord in the arena of the Rasa dance, as swarms of bees sang in accompaniment. So there was a mention earlier of Lakshmi Narayan. And I'll show you that just because they keep talking about the goddess of fortune, so I think it's worthwhile bringing her up. This is Vishnu, or Narayan, who is an expansion of Krishna. Some people think it's the other way around, but that's the actual statement of the Bhagavatam. And along with him is his consort, his wife, Lakshmi. They are eternal consorts. And here they are again. So she is known to be the goddess of fortune, of wealth. And many people worship her for that. Now, it is said in the earlier episode that we talked about, this Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, had come and wanted to take part in this Rasa Leela dance, but she was denied entrance. The gopis said to her, we don't allow in here ladies with, great wealth who come with tremendous jewelry and who are, no. We are dasi, we are maidservants. We are just humble servants of Krishna. This is no place. She says, but I'm his wife. And this is, sorry, there's no place here for wives. This is the place, this is a whole different mood. This is called Parakiya Ras. This is where the Supreme Being, God, is engaging in pastimes with people who are not married to him and who are in fact married to others, maybe, in some cases. Now, there's a huge controversy around this, and we're going to get into that controversy in just a few moments. I thought I'd whet your appetite and let you know that there are going to be some serious questions asked right in the Bhagavatam, and then you can bring up yours as well. So in this way, Krishna, the original Narayan, the husband of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, took pleasure in the company of the young women of Vrindavan by embracing them, caressing them, and glancing lovingly at them as he smiled his broad, playful smiles. It was just as if a child were playing with his own reflection. Keep in mind, this pleasure that the gopis are having is available to all of us. All of us, if that is what we want. Some people might want to love God as their child. That is also possible. Some might want to love him as their friend or buddy. That's also possible. And some might want to love him as a servant, just to serve. And others might want to love him in a very intimate way. If you notice, there is no formality here. There is no God is great and we are small. No, there is intimacy here. This is intimate relationship with God. It says here that their senses, overwhelmed by the joy of having his physical association, the gopis could not prevent their hair, their dresses, and the cloth covering their bodies from becoming disheveled, their garlands and ornaments scattered. Krishna had expanded himself as many times as there were gopis to associate with. And the Supreme Godhead, although self-satisfied, playfully enjoyed their company. Seeing that the gopis were fatigued from conjugal enjoyment, my dear king, because this is being narrated to the king, merciful Krishna lovingly wiped their faces with his comforting hand. The gopis honored their hero with smiling glances, sweetened by the beauty of their cheeks and the effulgence of their curly locks and glittering golden earrings. Overjoyed from the touch of his fingernails, they chanted the glories of his all-auspicious transcendental pastimes. Krishna's garland had been crushed during the conjugal dalliance with the gopis and colored vermilion by the kumkum powder on their bodies. To dispel the fatigue of the gopis, Krishna entered the water of the Yamuna. So now they went over to the river, to the Yamuna river, followed swiftly by bees who were singing like the best of singers, Gandharvas. He appeared like a lordly elephant entering the water to relax in the company of his consorts. So this example of the elephant is often given. And when they entered the water of the Yamuna river, they played. Indeed, the Supreme Lord had transgressed all worldly and Vedic morality, just as a powerful elephant might break the dikes in a paddy field. In the water, Krishna found himself being splashed on all sides by the laughing gopis who looked at him with love. As the demigods, the devas, worshipped him by showering flowers from their airplanes, the self-satisfied Lord took pleasure in playing like the king of elephants. Then the Supreme Lord strolled through a small forest on the bank of the river Yamuna. The forest had wonderful breezes carrying the fragrance of all the flowers on the land in the water. Followed by his entourage of bees and beautiful women, Sri Krishna appeared like an intoxicated elephant with his she-elephants. Although the gopis were firmly attached to Krishna, whose desires are always fulfilled, he was not internally affected by any mundane sexual desire. Still, to perform his pastimes, the Supreme Lord took advantage of all these moonlit autumn nights which inspire poetic descriptions of transcendental affairs. Now begin the questions. And this is going to be the part that I really want you to listen now and really pay attention, because this is going to really be very important. Okay. King Parikshit, who was listening to this whole narration, inquired. He said, the Supreme Godhead, the Lord of the universe, has descended to this earth along with his brother, his plenary portion, to destroy irreligion, adharma, and to establish dharma. He is the original speaker, follower, and guardian of moral laws. How then could he have violated those laws by touching other men's wives? Please destroy my doubt by explaining to me what purpose the self-satisfied Supreme Lord had in mind when he behaved so contemptibly. Ooh, this is heavy. In the purport, Prabhupada writes, it is clear that the enlightened, that these doubts will arise, it is clear to the enlightened that these doubts will arise in the minds and hearts of persons unfamiliar with the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Therefore, since time immemorial, great sages and enlightened kings like King Parikshit have openly raised these questions to provide the authoritative answer for all posterity. So the sage Shukdev said, the status of powerful controllers in the universe is not harmed by any apparently audacious transgression of morality we may see in them, for they are just like fire, which devours everything fed into it and remains unpolluted. So that requires a very high level of spiritual evolution. Then you are not affected or touched by even a transgression of morality. All of us, we are affected, we are bothered. So in the purport it explains great potent personalities. So remember, it's not just that they're great, but they're also very potent, highly spiritually advanced personalities are not ruined by an apparent transgression of moral principles. Sridhar Swami mentions the examples of Brahma, Indra, Soma, Vishwamitra and others. If fire devours all that is fed into it, but the fire does not change its nature. Similarly, a great personality, a highly evolved being, does not fall from his position by an irregularity in behavior. In the following verse, however, Shukdev makes it clear that if we try to imitate such great personalities who rule the universe, the result will be catastrophic. So the sage Shukdev continues, one who is not a great controller, who is not at that highly evolved stage, should never imitate the behavior of ruling personalities, even mentally. So this great controller he's referring to are not the kind of politicians we have in our world today. They are not highly evolved spiritual beings, please. If out of foolishness an ordinary person does imitate such behavior, he will simply destroy himself. Just as a person who is not Rudra or Shiva would destroy himself if he tried to drink an ocean of poison. The purport explains, Shiva or Rudra once drank an ocean of poison, and the result was that an attractive blue mark appeared on his neck. So Shiva is called Neelakanta. He drank up an entire ocean of poison. But if we were to drink even a drop of such poison, we would die immediately. Just as we should not imitate the pastime of Shivas, we should not imitate Krishna's activities with the gopis. We should clearly understand that while the Supreme Being Krishna descends To demonstrate religious principles, he also descends to demonstrate that he is God and we are not. That also must be demonstrated. The Supreme Lord enjoys with his internal potency and thus attracts us to the spiritual platform. We should not try to imitate him, for in so doing we will suffer severely. What will we suffer from? We will suffer from attachment. We will suffer from heartbreak. We will suffer from so many other things, sexually transmitted diseases, all kinds of stuff. We cannot imitate. So just because we come to know of the activity, what are these activities of God telling us? That our longing for pleasure, for sensuality, for love, all originate with God. That longing is telling us, within us, is telling us about our original love, our deepest love. We're trying to find it in this world, but becoming disappointed time and time again. It never quite turns out to be what we think. Maybe it does for you. I don't know. But for most of us, it doesn't turn out to be what we think. And we become disappointed. And then we have to realize that that which I seek exists, but it exists with God. It's not an illusion. It just doesn't exist in the material world the way I'm trying to get it. So once that foundation is clear, well, then you can still have your relationship with human beings, but you won't invest in them so much of your expectation for that perfect love, for that ideal longing, for that is, for that desire that is within your heart and soul. See, everything that we desire actually emanates from our soul. We desire happiness. Why? Because that is the nature of our soul. That is the nature of who we are. We desire peace. Why? Because that is the nature of who we are. It's not something out there. It's not something you will attain. It's not something you will achieve. It's something you are. We desire love because that is who we are. What does that mean? That is why. Because love requires two. It's not just a state that you experience within yourself. You want to share that. You want to experience that with another. And that's that experience with God. And then, yes, from there you bring it out to the world. You share it with everybody, of course. But not with attachment, not with exploitation, not with trying to use them, not with trying to manipulate them, not with trying to own them, not with trying to control them. No, that's what we do. And that's why it's such a mess. It continues, the statements of the Lord's empowered servants are always true, and the acts they perform are exemplary when consistent to those statements. Therefore, one who is intelligent should carry out their instructions. All right, I think I've explained most of these things. This part is important. Finally, a distinction must be made between the Supreme Lord and his empowered servants. Every living being, every Jiva Atma, including the Creator Brahma, may experience karma. But the Supreme Being, Sri Krishna, is eternally free from any entanglement in the laws of karma. He is unique in every way. There are two more verses here. Then it says, when those great personalities who are free from false ego act piously in this world, they have no selfish motives to fulfill. And even when they act in apparent contradiction to the laws of piety, they are not subject to sinful reactions. How then could the Supreme Lord of all created beings, animals, men, and demigods have any connection with the piety and impiety that affect those who live in the material world? In the purport is explained, even great personalities empowered by God are freed from the laws of karma. Then what to speak of the Supreme Lord himself? After all, the law of karma is created by him and is an expression of his omnipotent will. Therefore, his activities which he performs out of his own pure goodness are never subject to criticism by ordinary living beings. One more thing. He who lives in the as the overseeing witness within the gopis and their husbands, and indeed within all living beings, assumes forms in this world to enjoy transcendental pastimes. So he's saying that witness, that overseeing witness who is within the gopis and within their husbands and within all living beings, assumes forms in this world to enjoy transcendental pastimes. Now there's a very important explanation given here. that his forms are all eternal, spiritual existence and cannot be reasonably equated with our temporary flesh. And that's when Krishna appears, he comes in a spiritual body. Since Krishna is the Supreme Lord dwelling within the gopis, their so-called husbands and all other living beings, what possible sin could there be on his part if he embraces some of the beings he himself has created? What fault could there be if the Creator goes with his loved ones, the gopis, to a secret place, since he already dwells within the most secret part of every living being, that is within the core of their heart? When the Lord assumes a human-like body to show mercy to his devotees, he engages in such pastimes as will attract those who hear about them to become dedicated to him. So now, very, very important point that is relevant to all of us. Srila Jiva Goswami explains in this connection that when Krishna descends to this world in his original two-handed form, out of kindness he manifests that form in a way his devotees who have been conditioned by human society can perceive and understand. Here it is stated, Manusham Deham Ashritaha. He assumes a human-like form. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur glorifies the Supreme Godhead Bhagavan's conjugal pastime, stating that these romantic affairs have an inconceivable spiritual potency to attract the polluted heart of conditioned souls. It is an undeniable fact that any pure or simple-hearted person who hears narrations of the loving affairs of Krishna will be attracted to him and gradually become his devotee. So what he's saying here is that simply by hearing these pastimes, one becomes purified. A heart becomes purified. The envy that we have, the desires that we have become purified. In another purport it says, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes from Ujjvala Nilamani as follows, the gopis' jealous husbands consorted not with their wives but with their doubles, manufactured by the illusion of Maya. So in other words, these gopis that were there with Krishna, they actually had doubles who were there all night with their husbands. But the expansions that came out of them went to meet Krishna. Thus, those men, their husbands, never actually had any intimate contact with the actual gopis, the divine ladies, the gopis of Braja. The gopis are the internal energy of the Supreme Lord and can never belong to any living being. Krishna arranged their apparent marriage to other men simply to create the excitement of parakiya ras. This thing that is considered the worst, the lowest of affairs in this world. That is to say, when someone is having an affair with a married man or woman, it's considered the worst. That same thing in the spiritual world is reversed, is the greatest. The gopis are considered the greatest of all devotees of Krishna because they broke all worldly rules, all worldly sentiment, went against religion, against dharma, against society, only for him. Therefore it says these activities are absolutely pure because they are the Supreme Lord's pastimes, and saintly persons since time immemorial have relished these highly spiritual events. It then mentions that an entire night of Brahma had passed. A night of Brahma is 4.32 billion earth years. They were dancing for 4.32 billion earth years. But not quite. Within a 12-hour span on this earth, it felt like, it was experienced like an eternity and like a night of Brahma that lasts 4.32 billion earth years. So within that one night, they experienced that much of bliss, that much of association with Krishna. That experience of what would feel like eternity for us was compressed into one earthly night. At the end of the night, when it was time to go home, the gopis were reluctant. Krishna manifested. Now he made them feel embarrassment and fear for their elders within their hearts. And then with great reluctance, they returned home. In the final verse it says, anyone who faithfully hears or describes the Supreme Lord's playful activities with the young gopis of Vrindavan will attain pure devotion to him. Thus he will quickly become sober and conquer lust, which is the disease of the heart. And you might have some real questions about that one, so please ask them. But in the purport it says, the extraordinary power of Krishna's conjugal pastimes is clearly revealed here. The Supreme Lord's spiritual, loving pastimes are the diametric opposite of material lusty affairs. So much so that simply by hearing about them, a sincere devotee conquers sexual desire. By reading pornographic literature or hearing about material romance, we certainly do not conquer sexual desire, but rather increase our lust. But hearing or reading about God's conjugal affairs has exactly the opposite effect because they are purely spiritual. It is the causeless mercy of the Supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna, that he exhibits this Rasa Leela within this world. If we become attached to this narration, we will experience the bliss of spiritual divine love and thus reject the perverted reflection of that love, which is called lust. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Param drishtva nivartate. Once having directly experienced the Supreme, one will not return to material pleasures. All right, with that we end. And I would love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and what you make of all this. So let me go over to the wonderful things people have written. Transactional versus transformative. Oh, that's a good way to put it. Our dealings in this world are transactional. We always look at, what's in it for me? What can I get out of this situation, this person, this relationship? But when you have something that is transformative, that happens when you go beyond the selfish. It means you go beyond the ego, and then it becomes transformative. Wonderful point, Jen. And Jen also writes, I want a friend who trusts me. True. We all want that. We want to trust and be trusted. But let's go even beyond that and be a friend who trusts, whose trust is powerful. I trust you no matter what. Now, I don't say that you let someone exploit you or use you. No. But there is a power in trust that most of us don't understand. That is, I trust you to be you. I trust you to be the best part of you. I trust you to live to your highest potential. I trust you to live from your soul, from your heart. That kind of trust is transformative. That kind of love, that kind of friendship, that kind of love, relationship, whether it's intimate or otherwise, becomes a life-changing relationship. Someone who sees the best in you and brings that out of you. Thank you, Jen, for saying that. I've always felt free to ask you everything. And I encourage all of you, please ask anything. Please ask everything. Be polite, be kind, and I shall be glad to answer. All right, any last words? Anyone else want to share anything? Right there on your Instagram or wherever you're listening in, YouTube, Facebook, write your question. And I'll answer right now, live, while we're on. Otherwise, those of you who are watching this later as a replay on YouTube, because all of this is saved on YouTube, and it is also saved on Instagram, by the way, you'll find you can write your comments, and I'll be glad to answer even there. But hey, if you're here right now, get it from the horse's mouth. All right, let's give this a moment more. Anything else? Anyone else? Well, thank you for being here. Honestly, sincerely appreciate you. My heart is with you. My love is with you. And I hope that you can hear these pastimes with the most open mind and open heart and take them in and hear them again and again and again, because they will liberate you. They will free you from all the things that cause suffering in this world. Thank you so much. We're here every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And if you're in India, then it'll be Wednesday at 7:30 a.m., which will change with daylight saving time, but I'll let you know when that happens. All right, keep watching. We've got a lot more coming up. The next episode is going to be very amazing. Stay tuned in. Take care. Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.